your presentation so we could hear what are being prepared in Korea for K-12 AI education. So we had 3 presentations. Now we have 2 panelists to be invited to comment and ask questions to the 3 presenters. First, we have as our panelist, Professor of Sungkyunkwan University, Mr. Kim Jae-hyun from the Software Education Institute of Sungkyunkwan University. He is engaged in various AI-related educations. Second panelist is a teacher of Osang High School. So she is the president of the Korean Association of Informatics Teachers. So she will be sharing a lot of insights and opinions from the view of a teacher. First, each panelist will spend about 5 minutes to comment or ask questions to the 3 presenters. First, we have Mr. Kim Jae-hyun, Professor Kim Jae-hyun. You can start. Nice to meet you. I am professor of Sungkyunkwan University, the professor of computer engineering. I had listened to the 3 presentations. I would first thank all the presenters for the valuable presentation. It really helped me a lot. So AI and the 4th industrial revolution, we talk about them as factors that will be changing our lives, not just in industries, but also in various fields, including education. They will be affecting our lives, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic this year. We have a lot of remote education, online educations being provided. So we were thinking a lot about how we can utilize these technologies for education. There are different variations among different countries, but still we are all involved in an in-depth discussion about this. So we have a common issue to tackle. And we heard about the US case, AI for K-12 initiative. And in case of the US, I could see that it starts from K2 to K12. You have this big framework. You have 5 big ideas for that initiative. So I think we have a lot of similarities. We share a lot of your big ideas. In particular, the fact that it starts from K2 to K12, when you look at the contents of the education, what should be taught into how much depth? That is something we need to study further. In the US, I understand you don't need to worry about the teaching hours. You just focus on the contents to be delivered to students. So the teachers could have some flexibility on what they teach to students. But in case of Korea, the situation is a little bit different. The school curriculum is defined by the government, so we have to meet certain requirements like teaching time and etc. And we heard from researcher Sang Jung-suk about that big direction. What are the curriculums or courses provided to K-12 students for AI education in Korea? Well, those basics of AI courses, when we were creating them, well, these courses are targeting the middle school students who have completed the basic IT course already. And we had a difficult time deciding the difficulty level of this AI course because for middle school students, they take about 34 hours of basic IT. But for high school students, it's not in the regular curriculum. So if it is in the regular curriculum for high school students, we would have more in-depth teaching for students, but it is just optional course. So that is why we have some concerns about how much concrete details we can deliver to students. So this course called AI Basics, actually, anyways, we have created this course with such a short time and started to provide it to students. But so I think that is at least quite meaningful. And there are 6 courses developed so far. And when we actually see how they are being taught at schools, well, there are like a total of 6 courses. And I understand that local educational government institutes and this COFAC have collaborated together to come up with the course curriculum. And I think we would need to work together further to make improvements. And they worked really hard so far to create those courses, but how they will be implemented in the field at schools is something else. And we also would need more efforts on that regard, how we can actually make use of those courses. And the AI Basics course in our current regular curriculum, it is covering the understanding of AI and social impact of AI. So I think that is one of the big characteristics of Korea's AI Basics course. So what kind of social changes will be made by AI is covered in that course. And we also teach the theories of AI, and data-based machine learning is also taught. So I think that is a differentiating point for the Korean curriculum on AI. And that is it for my comment.
Then we will take questions later on. We'd like to listen to Mrs. Seo first.
안녕하세요. 방금 소개받은 청주고등학교 서인.
I am Seo In-soon.
한국정보교사연합회 대표로 이 자리에
I am the representative of Korean software education teachers community. As AI is going to be the regular curriculum, many teachers have interest in this, and many teachers are passionate about how they're going to teach students.
과목을 사실 교육을 시키긴 시켜야 되는데
Actually, we knew that we have to teach students AI, but we were confused about the way we have to teach the students, and we were confused about how we should teach students by using what. But fortunately, in Korea, AI is now announced to be the one of the regular national curriculum, but it was announced that AI will be the selective elective subject at high schools, and students who completed the previous information and AI information course at middle school can take the AI basics subject in high school. High school has 2 elective courses. One is general elective course and the other is career path elective course. As for general high school students, they first choose general elective courses, and then their second choice is career path elective courses. And the AI course at high schools can be taken by students as an elective course without learning the general elective course. So should students learn only information subjects at high school without taking AI course? Or which one do they have to take, and which one comes first between AI fundamentals subject and the information subject. So there's a little issue about the hierarchy of the curriculum courses. If we if we had established AI as a mandatory course, then the situation would have been better. That's what I am thinking. And if we establish the credit system for high schools, which allows more high school students to choose the subjects they want to take, then we can develop more in-depth AI-related subjects for high school students. In the case of China, they have a lot of information and technology-related courses. So I think in Korea, we need to provide more options of choice for students who would like to learn AI. And we need to also create AI subject in the middle school students' curriculum so that we can achieve better connection between AI study at middle school and AI study at high school. And the AI is actually the first subject that has been newly created and set as the official regular curriculum. To prepare for this, many teachers are receiving trainings and they are very passionate about teaching AI to students. But creating AI subject is not the goal itself. We need to help teachers provide better quality AI education to students. For this, we need to support teachers and we need to provide teachers with good resources that can be used for their classes. This will be all for my comments.
Thank you. So I think there should be a lot of questions directed to the presenters. I assume that you will be asking questions during the discussion time we have from now on. And researcher Song Jung-suk, you said that for the AI curriculum of Korea, it is just being created, and maybe from next year we can have it in the regular curriculum for K-12. So the government is taking the initiative to fully embrace it. And Professor Turetsky and Ms. CEO Singh, you heard her presentation. So I want to ask both of you how you think about that plan of Korea. Any comments or advices for Korea?
Well,
Yeah.
one comment that the last speaker made that I want to emphasize is the importance of supporting teachers. Even teachers who are experienced teaching computer science may never have been exposed to AI before. And so we have a lot of work to do to make teachers comfortable with the AI subject matter before they're able to teach it to their students. And I know that's a big problem in the United States, and I assume that it's the same way in Korea.
In fact, I would like to agree with what Professor David just said. In fact, that's the most important challenge that we are facing when we have to bring in AI in the curriculum, the school kids. How do we ensure that the teachers have the right resources, the grade-wise curriculum, like what do you teach in grade 6 and what do you teach in grade 7, and having the right infra at the schools, because in India we also have the challenge of that not all public schools have a robust connectivity and computer infrastructures. How do you provide for computer labs? How do you provide necessary skill sets? How do you upgrade the skills of the teachers? And how do you kind of leverage AI also in many ways in order to ensure that students have the right teachers to learn AI from? So a lot of common resources are put up on a digital platforms through which the students can learn. So that's what is being done right now. But yes, the problem that we identified is very real and very relevant for not only Korea but the world over.
Thank you very much for your important comments. So, anyone has comments, or would you like to add anything to what what those two gentlemen mentioned. Thank you very much for your good opinions. We've been thinking about the same thing in our foundation. That's why we think it is very important to provide training for teachers. And in Korea, the law on elementary school and middle school education requires us to produce textbooks for whatever subject that is reflected in the national curriculum. And we will have to make efforts and provide support for producing good quality textbook for AI education. And next year, we will support 500 schools that provide leading AI education to students. And by supporting those 500 schools that provide AI education to students, we will get a lot of lessons learned from them and good case examples, which will be helpful for teachers.
I actually rather have a question to Professor David Tulesky. I have a question to you. Well, one of the biggest debate we had was, well, when we translate something from English to Korean, we have some issues. Like, for example, the term cognitive thinking, the term we use for that in Korean is a little bit depending on it can be discussed a lot, and coding as well. If we translate it into Korean, the coding can mean like a programming in Korean. So there were a lot of debates about that, and people also called coding as software education. And we are talking about AI education here. So you have coding education in the US, and now we are here talking about AI education. Can we say they are different things? Actually, I studied in the US, and in the US, you have computer science as a course that has been taught at universities, and you have not changed the name of the course for such a long time. But in Korea, we are changing the names of those courses constantly. So what is the difference between AI education and software education? So do you think that we have to split AI education and software education as two different subjects, or should they be converged together?
I think that's a very interesting question. When I first started studying AI, which was some 40 years ago, AI was a mixture of computer science, but also cognitive science and psychology, even some interest in neuroscience. And I think today AI is seen as more thoroughly computer science. It's moved away from the early roots in trying to understand human thinking, but uh, it hasn't completely lost contact with those other fields. So I don't think AI is the same as software engineering because it does touch on these questions of what does it mean to understand language, say, or what does it mean to perceive the world? Even questions like consciousness, which are a little bit outside of the normal purview of AI, but they're the kinds of things that AI tries to make contact with, and we don't see that in software engineering. I think in the K-12 level, you can teach AI without teaching coding. So there are lots of things to learn about how machines learn, about how they perceive the world, about how knowledge is represented, that can be done without writing code. And there are wonderful tools now for K-12 students that will let them do things like train a classifier using, say, Google's Teachable Machine or using machine learning for kids, or there are now extensions to App Inventor. So kids can learn to build AI applications without doing any coding at all in the case of something like Teachable Machine, or with only minimal coding with things like App Inventor. So I do think there's this distinction between AI and coding or AI and software engineering. I think they're different subjects, but of course they're both related to computer science.
Yeah, exactly. If I may just add to that, very often the beginnings of AI is data science. So very often to understand data, to understand analytics, and then you kind of bring in the concepts of machine learning and AI. So coding comes much later. So essence of AI is to understand data, to understand how you work with it, and how do you build predictive modeling. So a lot of it is more of understanding this part of it, and then you use coding to build AI-based models. So that is how very many courses and the curriculum is being designed in India, especially for the school kids.
Thank you for your comment. Dr. Abhishek Singh, I have a question to you. So in India, how do you provide the software education and AI education in India?
Yeah, we have like as part of the curriculum, we have at various levels the subjects which have been introduced right from grade six. As per the new education policy that we have, in grade six, children start studying coding, and they get about programming is basics of programming languages, and then about data science and about AI. And in partnership with industry, what you've done is that in partnership with companies like Intel and IBM and Microsoft, we have designed an AI-based curriculum for school kids. And this curriculum is being taught with textbooks and trained teachers for students. And recently launched a program called Responsible AI for Youth, in which the level one course of AI for school kids was implemented all across the country. More than 50,000 kids took that level one course, and out of which 11,000 have completed it in just 6 weeks, and 100 of them are going ahead to build AI-based models. And I'm happy to say that all this is done in partnership with industry, and Intel has been one of the major partners for this course, the Responsible AI for Youth, and many of these students took part in a mammoth exercise on the 14th of this month, last month, and they created a Guinness Book of World Record for undertaking a AI-based lesson at a single point within a period of 24 hours. That was the maximum number of children who take an AI lesson. So what it helps is that these campaigns and these projects and these demos and these records also brings in awareness about AI and makes students are interested in that. And then the resources which are available make them access these courses and learn about AI.
So he mentioned the issues related to teachers and how are we going to view the computer science courses and AI courses. Actually, we have teachers here. We'd like to listen from teachers about how we need to operate the new AI course and the existing information course at schools.
현장 교사로서
Yes, I am a teacher. I'm teaching students.
튀어나온 것은 아닌데
Actually, it was not that we suddenly came up with AI curriculum, but we were not fully prepared to teach students AI. In Korea, we received trainings to reinforce our expertise and competencies to teach students. Maybe if it
나갈 수 있도록 하는
doesn't necessarily have to be a training, but there could be some platforms or some mechanisms to help teachers enhance our skills in AI so that we can deliver better education for students.
Anyone from the three presenters willing to answer her question? Yes, I mentioned it briefly. Well, we have leading schools participating in AI education. So teachers participating in those leading schools will be sharing some best practices. So if we do that, that kind of knowledge sharing can be more practical way of teaching other colleague teachers to learn about the teaching methodologies. And at the educational university, we are nurturing the AI teachers. I believe you know about this better than me. So I think that the kind of university curriculum can help us nurture the future AI teachers. Any other questions or comments? So Ms. Sang mentioned this. At the University of Education, there is the AI converged course to nurture AI competency for teachers. This started this year. So in case of Sungkyunkwan University, we have our educational college, and we have MOU with 5 cities and districts of Korea to have about 5 semesters course to teach this. And actually, if we look at the teachers joining our curriculum, their background is very diverse. About 1/3 has the background of majoring in this engineering subject, and the others are the non-technical majors. So in terms of information, well, we can say that the course is the AI converged course, but for non-technical majors, for them to use the teachable tools and etc. Actually, it is more like teaching them. Well, I think it's more practical to teach them how to use those existing platforms. So if that's the case, then of course, I believe that the teachers who majored in those engineering majors should be teaching it, but it might also be practical to have non-technical major teachers learn how to utilize those platforms and make it easier for students to access. So those are some debates to be carried out. So there could be some teachers who majored in how to teach students learn about engineering and etc. But in case of Sangkyunkwan University, we are more focused on the methodology of the teaching. So I think that we need to classify the types of teachers, the ones who are more focused on the principles and the ones who are more focused on the practical use.
Thank you very much. I'd like to talk with Professor Taraski. You are now working in the AI for 12K initiatives. Many Koreans are very much interested in that initiatives, and we are receiving a lot of help from that initiatives. Actually, it's almost the first time for us in Korea to teach AI to K-12 students. So your initiative is actually the only resources we can refer to. So we are referring to your resource a lot, and based on that, we are creating our own. And the US, India, and Korea and other countries may need to cooperate with each other. We need to establish an international cooperation system so that we can share researches, information, and experience. So, Professor Taraski and Dr. Singh, what do you think of this idea? And then we will close the discussion session.
I agree completely. There's lots of opportunities, I think, for scholars at different countries to help each other. And we set up the Africa K-12 initiative to define guidelines for the U.S. simply because we didn't think that we should be telling other countries what to do because their education systems are different. But we're very eager to learn from what other countries are doing. And we have members on our advisory board from China, from the UK. We would be interested to find a Korean colleague to add to our advisory board as well. And thank you for your very kind remarks about the AI for K-12 initiative. But I should point out that there are other groups who are releasing AI curriculum materials that might be of use to you. So AI for All has their open learning platform. And ISTE, the International Society for Technology and Education, just released an online AI course that they developed in collaboration with IBM. MIT has developed an AI ethics course. This was done by Blakely Payne at MIT, and schools are making use of that. So we're seeing more and more resources become available, and we're also seeing interesting things from other countries. So Some of these things I think will be described at the upcoming EAAI conference in February.
네, 감사합니다. 이제 거의 시간이 돼서 오늘 토론과 발표를
Thank you.
모두 마무리.
Almost time's up, so I think we have to close discussion. Thank you for your attention. We have to close the session due to time constraint.